All right, so in this second part of the week 6, we're going to continue some of the work we started here. So getting to know your template, you'll want to complete that this week. And then we're going to build your site from the template. So we'll do that. And then we're going to actually have a different current topics. And this will be learning more about FTP. So let me actually start there since sometimes I forget. So FTP, File Transfer Protocol, is still around even though it's becoming less and less pervasive. We are using Git with Git push to upload code into our server, right? In this case, it's a GitHub server. But there are still many, many sites that are built on this technology of FTP, and there's reasons why it's still popular. There's reasons why it's going away. So first, I want you, based on your knowledge, to do some research about what FTP is. Find some resources. If you already have some experience with FTP, you could talk about that, but I still want to see some links to help other students understand what this is. And there actually is a way to do FTP commands from the command line. I've done it. I've played with it once, but because our server doesn't need FTP, I haven't used it. I used to use a server that required FTP, but lately I just have noticed the more and more I see things moving away from this paradigm. But it is still very pervasive, so I want you to at least know about it and have some understanding of what it does. Okay? All right, so that's, and by the way, normal replies here. So 150 words in normal reply on that one. So now let's actually look at what you need to do. Let's complete the getting to know you template, right? So, oh, I didn't write this up, but here's the general idea. Is that we started this process in the first part of the week, right? And I had you start this template file that, this is just where I'd left it. So this, by the beginning of this, should have more on here. And so what you want to do now is complete the code. Hopefully you've gotten all the files and had at least a beginning understanding of what they're used for, and I'll show you why that's important in a minute. And then start it into that index file, right? So in this case, right, is starting in here, and I already started you looking at it last time, understanding first all the links that is here, right? What else is in the head, the viewport. If you don't know what that is, do a quick search. There's some great stuff out there. Oh, and by the way, since the last video, I was able to fix my issue with pushing. And what I ended up having to do, and I found a Stack Overflow with this, was just delete something in my keyframe, my key access in my OS X. So, wasn't that bad. I was able to do it. I should be able to push just fine now. And again, that was only because I had 2 accounts. Okay, so going through here, right? So ID page top. So the question is there any CSS associated with this? There may or may not be. It may just be an ID for you to show. So here's one really cool way you can figure this out. But that's the idea, right? So do you understand now on nav, and again, I'll show you this in a second, what these things are doing, right? These are classes that then style that nav class, right? So nav in this case, and this is, so this is actually something I wanted to talk about. Every template probably has this, which is its features. And this is great because it actually gives you some content you could use in your getting to know you or the work you're doing here, right? So definitely look through here, and I can see I have a Bootstrap 4, so you want to definitely identify which version of Bootstrap you're using. It's got some fixed navigation scrolling, and I'm like, okay, I see that, and I'm going to go ahead and go view, because this is where I was heading, into open it in the browser. And so what I see here is if I scroll down, right, so a nice sticky aspect of that. And so what I'd want to do here is, as I'm looking through, and this is something that you will develop the more you do this, okay, whether it's Bootstrap or not, was being able to look at the HTML is one level of understanding. There are tools that will help you know what's being rendered, how it's being rendered, how it's being styled, right? Like these class containers. class called container we've seen. This is Bootstrap, right? So you could easily just give a one or two or maybe one sentence of what that container does. And now the question is there style on it, right? So one thing you can do on anything, and I've shown you this at the very beginning of the site or this class, so we're going to do it again. I'm going to click actually on this image because this is one of the images I'm going to want to change, and I'm not going to end up using this mock this idea, but I'm going to right click, I'm going to hit inspect, and then what it does is it drops me into, and you can see actually as I move around these divs what they're doing, right? So then I can tell this is using the grid. I can tell it's a column large 7, right? And then I can tell in there there's a header, right? So the more work you do here, and I definitely want to see you go through as much level as is listed here, really is going to help you, right? So this one I can see that this class is mock, device mock iPhone 6. So if I actually drop here and I go here, oh, I can actually see, by the way, I can actually see like how I got here. So I was inside, first I was in the HTML, I was in the page ID, page top, I was in the header that was in a div, and 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 then div called div.device. And then if I scroll down here, I can actually see, oh, that's how they pulled the image. So if I wanted to change that image, let's say, to one of the ones that they actually had, I could do it temporarily here, or I could do it permanently inside of my, well, not inside the index file, inside. And this is the other thing, right, to look for here, is this would actually be inside the device mockup min CSS. Okay, so that's why the more time you spend understanding how your site is created from both just the high level of the HTML, right, and knowing where it's pointed to will help you do the next thing we're going to do, okay, which is basically build out a minimum version of this, right? So, and there's some discussion, I know Todd covers this, about the semantic benefits of using nav, or maybe not as much as we had hoped, and coming hopefully in future browsers. But in this case, you can see a lot of divs, and there's a term you often hear called divitis. And so we have a div, right, that in this case, if we roll that up, you can see when I drop it, look at how much is in here, right? And again, keep your eye over here to see that. So when you want to go look at that one, like let's say that class right here, this is being pulled out of the spacing. Oh, okay, so in that case, that's a really good question. So that's spacing, and that's that file I probably wasn't going to use. So I'll see how that impacts me in a little bit to see how that does. So I have the grid frame, sassy file. But anyway, we're going to get there. Okay, so the point is that I want you to now complete the rest of this, right? So I can see I have some nav, right? So I have some class. And again, there's two ways to look at this. One is just strictly from the HTML and then looking at, because in my case, I have a template specific CSS. Then I have what's called the vendor, which is the Bootstrap CSS. And this is a CSS that's just provided with you through Bootstrap. And then this is the CSS that they wrote specifically for this template. And so I could look through here and see, oh yeah, main, yeah. So the more time, right? So it's not that you're going to understand all this. By no means that's not going to happen. Again, depending on your level here. But the more time you spend with this, right? Which is why I want you to do this, right? I want you to go through. Now, I'm not going to make you do every CSS, but at least I want you to understand where is the CSS for that, right? So again, if I was looking at nav, ML auto, the question would be, where is that? It's up in navigation. But again, I've shown you this process to make that a little easier. I'm going to hit inspect. And I'm like, okay, master, let me see if I can scroll. Oh, is it auto? There it is, okay. So that is, let me make sure. So actually it wasn't. It was under collapse navigation. Oh, yeah. So actually this is up here. So up here, right? So up here I could start, oh yeah, all right. So this I know, nav, toggle. This is Bootstrap actually rendering a mobile ready menu, right? Because I'm looking at this thing from a responsive design. So if I like looked at it as a Pixel 2, definitely. If I looked at it as a responsive, and you see this when you do this as well, when you change your, because that's what you're doing. Let me show you what I mean. So notice as soon as I get rid of the inspect, then this renders the viewport based on the size, and then it doesn't have that menu, that drop down menu. It actually has the menu itself. So the code that I was looking at is related to that. And how can you tell? Well, if you find these collapsed, that's why it is. And this is also part of what you can research, right? Because if you search Bootstrap collapse, you'd find out what that means, right? And then here's where I can see a unordered list that has some list items, right? And then I see download, and these then correspond to these, right? And this above just shows how it's going to respond. That's why we call it responsive design, okay, to the different screen sizes, therefore viewports that it's looking through. Okay, so this is where, right, use your Google. Your Google is your friend, or whichever search engine you like, to help you do as much as you can to dig through this. So what will I look for? I will look for a level of detail in your file, in your README file here. Okay, so this is where, right, you could now do like, let's just do the first one just to help you see what I'm looking for. Sorry. So let's go back in here, right? So let's now, oh yeah, I actually already have a heading. This should have more on it. So in this case, I could start looking at, right, the head section, right? And then you could look at the head section to say, let's see, inside the head, I would need to do some research about, you know, we've talked about UTF-8, so that should be pretty simple just to put, you know, a couple words about that. Viewport, maybe something, I'm trying to remember, I believe we had talked about that in the HTML, right? A description, these two, it's like if you don't know, Google is your friend, but basically metadata gives the search engine the ability to look at a description of your site, the author if that's applicable, title we've talked about, right? So you want to go through here, and I would want to see this in your work, having identified, let me not go too fast here, having identified as much as you can figure out every line of that index file, okay? That's what I'm looking for. All right, so let me come back here. Now that you've done that, right, and I'll write a little more content in, then all you have to push in this case is your MD, README MD file, and then provide me that link to the private repo for that one. Okay, so now let's actually do the one that I think should be a little more fun. It's like you're finally ready. You've done enough research on your template that you're ready to build your site from your template, right? But here's the key, and I want you to do this in iterations, and you'll see what I mean, is determine the minimal files you need in the root folder for your GitHub repo to have a working site. Because a lot of this stuff you may not need. And so taking it one step at a time allows you to then see what you absolutely need, and don't bring over something that you don't know you need. Okay? So let me just show you now what I mean by this. So now I have open, right? Let me skip back here. So I have the GitHub folder for my template, and then I have the index, right? And I have a CSS directory, right? Now these CSS directory image, this is in the template file, and then I have the index file. So in this file right now, this is what you have from just the work we've been playing around with, putting some little bit of style, a little bit of content into your GitHub repo, your site. Okay, so now what I'm going to have you do is actually start this in stages. So the first thing I would do is I would come down here into the template, I'd pull in the index file, and I'd do a Control A, copy all that, and then I would come into the index file. Again, remember the difference between the index file in here renders the template. This is actually what renders when you go to the URL for your site. And then I do Control A and Control V. Okay, so now that gives me the first stage, right? And now I'd go through, and by the way, this is really good to do, is now I could actually look at the way this is going to look. And this is local, and I'm going to tell you right now, it'll be broken. But that's okay, because what you want to know is what is required. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to open it in a browser, and sure enough, that's broken. This is just, and this is good to know. This actually helps you in a way to do it this way, so you can see, right, there's that menu, right, because it doesn't have the CSS for the bootstrap or the CSS it needs. We have some content, so we could look side by side to determine, okay, here's what it looks like when it has all of its pieces. Here's just the HTML. Okay, so take a look at that. Spend a little time looking at that. It will be helpful. So now I'd go through here and I look and start pulling in the pieces I would need. So I'm like, okay, vendor, I'm going to need, based on just this, I'm going to need just those files. Let's see, are there any other vendor files I would need? And I would scroll through here and look. Well, I'm going to need an images, so I'll grab that in a minute. Scroll through at the very bottom. Sometimes there's is there any? Oh yeah, so there is, and this uses jQuery, and we haven't talked about jQuery, but I can tell it needs it. Now the question would be, if I don't do it, will it break it, right? So what I'm going to do is build this up one piece at a time. Right? So first I'm going to actually just move the pieces up in the head section that I have for vendor. So I'm going to go over here. And this is where, because I'm not going to be modifying these files, I'm just going to be actually placing them into the root directory, right? I would do this. Let me just show you. This is where I'd go back to my file manager. I'm going to do a new window, right? And I'm going to bring these side by side. Okay, so there we go. So this is my desktop. This is my 82. That's here. And then that's the directory where everything's at, right? And so what I would do over here is I'd do the same thing where I'd go desktop, 82 here. Okay, now in this case, right, I have a CSS. I know I'm going to need the vendor, right? But I wouldn't bring it all over because I'm not going to need everything. And in the bootstrap, right, I don't need all of these. But if I keep the structure as it is, then I can just choose the folders I want, right? So there's two ways I could do this, and I'll show you. But first I'm going to do, and this is really important to understand where you're at in the file structure when you start doing this stuff. If I just pull over vendor into here, then it's going to place it, and this, I'm going to just do it. This is from the template. I'm going to pull this over into here, and this will place it in the root level of there. And then what I could do is go through and get rid of stuff I don't need. So bootstrap, let's see, now I could go, but by the way, before I get rid of anything, let's go look at my rendered page, right? So did that fix? Sure, fixed a lot. Didn't fix everything, did it? It fixed a lot, so I can see now how much of where my page depended on the vendor supplied files. And by the way, I can see it here too, is what we're talking about. So I would only need those files for now, right, to do that. And I can see, oh yeah, I need this CSS min, this mock, right? So the question would be, yeah, if I want to use those device mockups, but for now, probably what I could do is just one more copy, I think, to actually make it look the way it should. And in this case, it's that vendor specific CSS that I could probably bring over to get it done. So let me try that, right? So again, I'm going to have these two side by side. I'm going to come back in a little bit, get rid of what I don't need. I am going to look at, this is their CSS. Now, because I already have, coming back here, a CSS directory that I had used before, I can just do this. Back. I can just select this file. Oh, it's actually showing me. That's okay. And that file. There we go. I just used Shift to select them both. And now I'm going to drag them over to this. Now what have I done here? And this is why this is, the reason why this is such an important exercise is it really makes you understand how this site, how this template, it from a file perspective is being rendered. Okay? Now, coming back here, I can see that that reference was to a CSS directory and that file, and I copied that into there. And so the next question would be, how much of my site, oh wow, that fixed a lot. That is a lot. I might want to start going, okay, what else do I really need at this point? Right? Because I have, let's see, does my menu, oh, let's see, does my menu, oh yeah, so my menu still got a little bit of issue. I got to figure out what that is. Maybe I go in and look at, okay, what does that need? And then I might go into, so that's where I would do. I'd do a multi-layer, right? Do it and figure out, and that's why I say here, and I think I've given you at least enough to get started here, is determine the minimal files. Because if you just bring over everything, you haven't done what I've asked, right? What I've asked you to do is understand where these files are needed, right? So so what you want to do now that you've done that, right? So once you've completed, because now you have some new updates. Oh yeah, see, look at this. And it actually copied those in there. And so what I would do is I'd come in here, let me just finish this concept with you, is now that I'm in here, I could go into here, into my vendor, in here, and Bootstrap, and say in my CSS, which of these did I need? Now the cool thing, let's just do that and then we'll come back, right? So let me just complete this thought with you, is that I needed the Bootstrap, Min CSS, there it is, I needed that one. Is there another Bootstrap I needed? I needed theirs. Looks like I also needed, and I don't think I've pulled them over, and maybe that's the last piece I would have needed, is some of that jQuery stuff. Vendor, Bootstrap bundle, that might have been it, and I could play with that, but let me do the first one just to give you that idea, because I won't, again, need all of them. But if I find I do, later I can go and grab them. That's the cool thing about the way we've done this. Everything is still intact over in your other site, and it's easy to figure out how to bring it back if for some reason you deleted it. So under vendor, Bootstrap, I only needed the Min CSS. So this one, let's see if I delete these, and I can just hit delete. Yep, move to trash. And let's go delete. Let me make sure I'm on the right file. Delete. Cool. So now what I could do is come back to my site here and go, let's see, did that break anything? I don't think it broke anything, but I still got to figure out a few things in here about what I need. Okay, so I think that gives you, again, I gave you a little more there just to help you kind of understand the thinking and the logic behind what I want to see, and then you can do your git add. By the way, I wouldn't do this git add until you have everything, you know, pretty much the way you want it, because the thing is, you'll upload less files. Now, having said that, I do want to show you a message I got, and this was great, from GitHub. So actually, GitHub said when I uploaded the template before that there was some, and this is good, high severity issues, and it's because it was looking for some JavaScript called Lodash that in this case I'm not going to use. Right, so I can go in there and look at that and then delete it out of the repo because I know I'm not going to get it. And I'm guessing most of where you might get a flag like this is in that JavaScript. So let me just show you what I mean inside the template, inside the JS, or maybe it's inside the vendor. Right, so inside of here. Yeah, so jQuery is here. Oh, good. So if for some reason I can't find it, it actually is telling me the file too that it was located in, which was this file, which is kind of an interesting file because and the more you learn about GitHub, you'll learn about this lock file, and it comes in here and it looks at, again, we're kind of going further than my intention was, because as we get deeper, there's just more and more you need to understand. about what this means, but this talks about, because your JSON, your package.json is actually an indication of all the versions that you're using, right? And I can see this by looking through here. There's Bootstrap. It talks about, you know, dependencies, and I bet you anything I can find that Lodash in here somewhere about where they, but I can spend some time also just looking at that to figure it out. And like I said, I'm going to do that because I want to make sure I don't put code out on GitHub that is not good code, because it happens over time is that code gets updated all the time. So what I will do here is at this point, I think you have enough to get started. I will do a little more digging on what my issue is, because you may not get my issue, right? You may not have the same one, but I'll give you, when I do the attendance post for week 6, what I want you, what I did to find my issue and how I fixed it. Okay? All right, it gives you enough for this week. So now we're moving into week 7. And again, here we're going to have all new content from before because we're ahead, which is good. I really like being ahead. So the topics I'm considering for week 7 here is you're going to end up building out your menu. That'll be an important part of what you do here. Doing some other research, I think, in front-end frameworks is still an important to understand because there's so many out there. And again, we've already done some of this, so this will all be new code. We're looking at the code already, so I'm happy about that, that we're ahead. That gives me a chance as you're starting to build out your project 0, we can have some other content to look at. All right, have a great week. Talk to you later.